YouTube, super mega basic intro to guitaring part 2. For people who don't really know anything about guitars and don't want to appear like a... It's embarrassing, just ask. Most people are alright. Most guitarists are lovely. Just not necessarily if you look on certain Facebook pages or in forums for guitars. You get generally unfortunately quite a lot of guitarists are arseholes. Only probably less than 10% or something like that, but those 10% are the ones that go on the internet and tell you stuff that is not necessarily true. It's like, oh, you want to play Jimi Hendrix stuff? You have to have a Stratocaster like this. And you don't. You can still play. If you give Jimi Hendrix any of these guitars, he's still going to sound like Jimi Hendrix. Maybe, if you want to absolutely nail it down to exactly the same, then... But in principle, they're all do it. You can still play Purple Haze on an acoustic or anything. Yeah, so I was talking there about guitars. So this is, as I said, you should know this is a Fender Stratocaster. It doesn't say Fender on it because it's not made, but there's a lot of copies. You do get various... There's a company called Squier who are actually owned by Fender that make copies themselves, but they're licensed so they look exactly the same. This is before there was problems with people. You're not actually allowed to copy a Fender exactly. So there's always slight differences. This one actually has a very Fender-looking headstock, but it's not exactly right. Nowadays, you're more likely to find the Squier will have a headstock that looks like this, just the shape of it doesn't make any difference to the sound. But you'll see all these other ones that have got slight differences. You'll get sort of in the 80s it became popular to have, sort of pointy headstock. Still the same thing, it's a fashion thing. But there's also a reason for Fender own the copyright to the exact right headstock shape. This is a little bit, not quite the same anyway, it's a little bit longer. But Stratocaster was not the first electric guitar. The first electric guitar production, the big game changer, the big thing was the Telecaster, which I've got one there, probably a bit more like it. The reason I chose the Strat to start with is because that's the one that most people think of as an electric guitar. The Telecaster, this is not a Fender one. I'm choosing this one over these two. As you can see, I haven't altered that one. It's got different controls on it, and that one I've added an extra bit. But this is what a normal Telecaster looks like. Apart from, as I said, you're not allowed to exactly copy a Telecaster. You see these Japanese ones, that's what a Telecaster scratch plate should look like. This one's just a slightly different shape, kind of here, and it doesn't have it's got its own headstock. So a Telecaster only has 2 pickups, 1 and 2. The big thing about this guitar when it first came out was it's solid wood. It's just a solid plank, whereas before that all guitars were hollow. Guitars were hollow. They had a pickup in them, but they were all hollow. It wasn't until, I'm sure you've read up all about Les Paul. He invented this thing where he had like a railway sleeper and he put a pickup in it so there was no actual guitar, and everyone laughed at him for years and years, and one of his friends, Leo Fender, was like, yeah, that's an interesting thing. So he made basically that guitar. One of the big things was the neck comes off on it, so rather than having to... The thought about that was when things wear out, like the metal frets wear out or you damage it, you just unbolt it, put a new neck on. Easy, just buy another neck. It's pure simple, and everything sort of comes to bits. It's like, this is all just bolted on. It's like, you don't need to know very much to take one of these to bits. It's like you've got four screws. They're called bolts, but they're actually just wood screws holding the neck on. So if you unscrew them, I'll take the strings off first. Unscrew them, the neck comes off, and then it's just screws, takes that out. It's 6 screws holding this bit on, so you can basically assemble them as bits. Whereas if you look at what was the big guitars at the time, they were all, it's like, you can't really take, how do you change the neck on that? And it's like, yes, you can, but you have to steam off the glue, and not an easy thing to do. It's not a case of four bolts and put another one on. So the original guitars were actually the necks were meant to be replaceable once they wore out. That didn't happen because people, I've got a guitar, a Fender guitar from 1960. You don't replace the neck on that. You keep it because it's old. It's worth tons of money now. Yeah, so Telecaster being the first ever electric guitar, as far as I'm concerned. Then a couple of years later, he invented the bass. Mr. Fender invented the bass, and then the bass was the same shape as this. He kind of made it, you know, he'd put it out on the road with some tourers, and they were going, oh, it could be a bit. So like, if you look at this, it's a bit square. This has got like a carve here to make it smooth, and it's got like carves here, so it's like it's contoured to fit onto your body a little bit better. It's also got 3 pickups in it rather than just 2. You know, more is more. This also doesn't have a tremolo on it. It's just solid. The strings go through the back here and come through the top. And what you end up with is what I would suggest is my favourite guitar and the best one to learn on, your best first guitar. But I totally get, because I was the same. My first guitar was a Stratocaster because they were the cheapest, but I was right into, I was into Deep Purple and Black Sabbath. Deep Purple, Richie Blackmore does use a Stratocaster. But I was thinking, I want, you know, the evil ones, the pointy ones. I totally get that. So it's really whoever your favourite guitarist plays, you can get something that probably looks like that. Most of the guitars you see are from designs in the 50s, even something like the Flying V there. You'd probably have a guess at knowing why this is called a Flying V. This is a Gibson type guitar, again, not a real Gibson. Which is, but ultimately, again, it's the same thing. All the chords are in the same place, all the notes are in the same place. It just looks like a spaceship. They're absolutely cool. So I try to get the thing to focus on me. While I've got this out, you'll notice that the pickups on this, it looks like it's got 4. Well, it does, but they're 2. So it's basically, you've got a pickup like what this is, but there's 2 next to each other. That makes them sort of beefier sounding. They're called humbuckers, which you generally get in Gibson guitars. You'll see them in, some of them have got double coil pickups and some of them have the single coils. If you look at this Telecaster here, it's got a single in the bridge position, the trebly one, and then it's got a humbucker in the neck position. You do that because there's the bridge. Again, there's another type of bridge. Same thing, still a bridge, where it starts, and this is the bridge and this is the neck. So this is the neck pickup because there's the neck, and this is the bridge pickup because there's the bridge. And this the other pickup, which neither of these have, is the middle pickup, like on the Stratocaster there. So it's a bridge, neck, middle. The middle one's the one in the middle, just commonly known as that. And then there's normally a switch to choose which one. So this one's basically that, chooses this pickup, down the way chooses this pickup, and if you put it in the middle, you get both of them. This one has a volume for each one of the pickups and an overall tone control, which I've not actually got to yet. They're all basically in principle the same thing, but slightly different, but it still does the same thing. Generally the single coil, which are these Fender, let's just call them Fender type pickups, are thinner and kind of sound a lot better for more sort of clean. Are better at that sort of thing, and generally humbuckers are better when you've got a bit more, when you've got the distortion up, whatever that is. Generally humbuckers are a bit better at that, but you will see people play Telecasters and play very heavy metal on them, and Stratocasters, and vice versa. They're all kind of able to do anything within reason. Certainly for playing in the house, or you can make them all sound good. There's not a huge difference between any of them. This one, slightly simpler layout. This has got a volume control. The louder you put it, turn it down. And the other one's a tone, which I've not got to yet, which makes it sound, it takes away the treble, makes it a bit more muffled. And then the lever, so neck pickup, both the pickups on, and then bridge pickup. Yep. Yeah, what other kind of guitars? You get a Les Paul, which kind of looks a bit like that. It's basically, again, all these things are very similar. Les Pauls are generally more expensive. I'm not as much of a fan of the Les Paul guitar because they're a bit heavy, and I don't know, they're just not as cool. But if that's your thing, you get different. It's not a case of Telecasters are better than Les Pauls, although I do think Telecasters are better than Les Pauls, but you could buy any of these shapes starting from like new, probably not £100 anymore, £150 you could probably get a Telecaster or a Stratocaster or a Les Paul shape or an SG, that's the one that Angus Young uses in Tony Iommi, or I don't know if you don't tend to get cheaper Flying V's, because obviously these are, when you're looking at a guitar at 150 quid, it's meant to be able to do for beginners, and although it's amazing, I suppose there's not really any reason why a beginner wouldn't have a Flying V, apart from the fact you can't play it sitting down, because it's a big stupid shape. It's also massive. So, generally you find that when you get the more obscure shaped guitars, the crazy looking ones, they're not normally beginner ones, because it's not really a good idea to learn to play on something like that. Also, just not due to anything physical about it, but if you're in a heavy metal band, playing death metal or something, yeah, you could totally use this guitar. It doesn't look the part though. Sometimes that's good, having a guitar that doesn't look like it's what it should be. Sound-wise, totally fine. The guy in Slipknot uses a Telecaster, so it's like, that's pretty heavy. He has one that's, he's got it painted black and it looks a bit more evil, rather than being, like a pretty thing. But what it looks like doesn't really dictate what it is. Yeah. So what have I talked about now? I'm just generally just talking rubbish about anything, haven't I? I think it's been 10 minutes. I'll put this out as a few things I recommend. I'll go on to tremolo systems next, I think. Rock on.